Hey there and welcome to another video. My name is Kyle, and in this one we're going to be doing a full setup on a bass. Now this isn't a very expensive bass. I picked this up from a friend for about 20 bucks. I don't know, maybe like 10 years ago or something like that. So I've had it for a long time and it plays okay. I just need to put new strings on it, and these new strings are a different tension, or they're a different gauge. So they're going to have different tension on the neck. Anytime you put a different gauge of strings on a guitar or a bass, it is going to have an effect on the neck, and so we're going to have to do a little bit of setup there. Here I am just taking some reference measurements. I'm looking at the string height at the 12th fret, and we can see it's about 8/64 there and just shy of 8/64 there on the low E and the high G side. Now what I'm doing here is I'm sighting down the edges of the neck, and I'm looking to see what the neck relief is doing. And neck relief describes how much how much bowing in the neck there is. Hopefully there's no back bow, which would be a hump in the neck. What I'm seeing here is that there's more relief on the bass side, on the E side, than there is on the treble side, on the G side. That's not uncommon, but with cheaper necks especially, we're going to have to deal a little bit more with that. Here I'm actually just taking the relief measurement kind of properly, so to speak. So what you do is you put a capo on the first fret, and then we're going to push down on a fret up the neck, pretty much at the end of where the effective range of the truss rod is. And so for a lot of guitars, that's the 14th fret. For a bass, because this neck is so long, it's a 24 fret neck, I'm going to go way up to the 18th fret, and then I'm going to be testing at the 9th fret right there. As you can see me doing, I'm using feeler gauges to do this, and that's a very, very precise way to see exactly how much relief is in the neck. And what I'm seeing here is about 10/1000ths of an inch on the low E side, and basically no clearance at all on the treble side. Now, what I'm going to do is put on a new set of strings, and this new set of strings is a different gauge. Anytime you change string gauge, whether it's to a lighter or a heavier set, you are going to have to adjust the neck most likely, because there's a different tension on the neck. So this is a set of 45 to 105, which is a heavier set of strings than what's on here currently. So I'm expecting that's going to change the neck relief. It's going to add more relief as there's more tension on those bigger strings. I forgot right now, usually what I do if I'm changing strings is I throw a caliper on the old strings just to see where it's at. I forgot to do that right here, but I'm going to do that a little bit later, and I'll show you what's actually on there. So now it's time to get these old nasty strings off of this bass and get ready to clean the fretboard and polish up these frets. Now, what you can see me doing here is I'm running my fingers along the side of the fretboard, feeling the ends of the frets. It is not uncommon with the different seasons and as the guitar dries out to get sharp fret ends as the wood starts to dry. Now, this bass has been around for a long time, and so basically all that contraction, that wood contraction, has already happened, and those fret ends have already been trimmed up. But if they were starting to get sharp, then I would tape this up and I would file down those fret ends, which is a different process. but one that is totally necessary for a full setup and to keep an instrument playing nicely. Now, you see me put that blue tape on top of the guitar. For a finish like this, it's not super important because it's not easily scratched. This is like maybe a rubbed on finish. But if you're working on a guitar that has, it's always good practice, and if you're working on a guitar that has a nice shiny finish, throwing some tape on there around the neck is going to make a huge difference, especially if you're doing any sort of fret work where you're filing the frets. You gotta keep the stuff away from the finish, either the shards of metal or the tools itself. So this is just a bit of insurance there. Another thing that I'll do sometimes is around pickups. I'll put that tape over the pickups, and that helps keep these little metal fibers from either the fret ends or from the steel wool here from sticking to those pickups. These pickups are not super strong in this guitar, and I'm not using a ton of it, so I'm not all that worried about it here. There's something that I just love about this type of work when you're cleaning something up, like getting in the corners of the frets, and I usually just like to not listen to anything while I'm doing this, and just hearing the sound of the steel wool across the frets and the fretboard and cleaning it up. It's very satisfying. I don't know what it is. It offers a very meditative experience. Now, I have had a shop vac, a bigger shop vac in the past, and if you're doing this all day long, it's nice to have a bit of a longer hose with a brush attachment. Then, I'd definitely invest in one of those. But if you're doing a couple of these a week, if you're not doing it that often, I love this small portable DeWalt one. It does everything I need, and it's got plenty of suction. Now, when you put lemon oil on a fingerboard, usually that amount right there is all you need. This stuff goes a long way, and if you saw my last video on the D18V, about that much was more than enough, and I had to wipe off the excess. Now on this neck, you can really see how dry this wood actually is. I haven't done this, since I got it, so it has been over 10 years without any oil on it, and that fretboard, all that wood just soaked it right up. So it's going to take a little bit more, going to really work that in, and then that'll be nice and conditioned. Until somebody tells me otherwise, I'm going to continue believing that by rubbing this oil in vigorously and heating up, using the friction from your hand, heating up that fretboard, that it's going to allow the top to open up a little bit. Again, I don't know if that's actually true or not. I don't know if it makes that big of a difference, but it feels satisfying to get it nice and warm under your fingers. So I'm just going to keep doing that. Now, what I'm illustrating here is that these bridge barrels saddles are in a specific configuration, and that is setting the intonation in a certain way. I'm going to take these off because I'm going to clean this bridge. This bridge is very gross, so I'm going to get under there, and in order to do that, I have to take these off. But one thing that is very helpful is to take a photo of a bridge before you take it off. One of the reasons is it gives you a good starting point to get those barrels back into a place, where then you don't have to make much of a change when you go to do the intonation setup. The other reason is that some of these barrels are actually different. If you see the bass, the two on the bass side versus the two on the treble side, is that they're actually a little bit different, and sometimes the saddles, and this is true on any bridge, guitar or bass, sometimes the saddles are actually different sizes or different heights, or you have different heights on the set screws. So taking a photo before you pull it apart can be super helpful when you go to put it back together. And of course, the other biggest thing is just having a good way to organize all your pieces, which honestly I'm not really doing here. I'm just setting them into little piles. When you have little springs and rolling things, that's not the greatest way to take care of that. That should be in in some container that's got, you know, little compartments for each thing. And as you can see, that saddle is pretty nasty there. So I'm just taking a polishing cloth and some of that guitar polish and spraying it up and then wiping it down. One of the things you can do if you're really getting in here, you could take toothpicks is a great way to get in some of those crevices and some of those corners, and Q-tips are the other one. So I'm a big fan of using those if you're really spending the time to really get it nice and clean. Another thing too is if you have a big job like that, is to just use a dish of warm soapy water, or even just water a lot of times is all you really need. You don't need any sort of heavy duty cleaners or any sort of heavy duty polish. Now I'm going to go ahead and put these saddles back on in reverse order in the way that I took them off. I really should have put the blue tape down at the very beginning before I even started. That is a great way to help protect the top, especially when you're doing this kind of stuff. You got a screwdriver back there and you're pulling stuff in and out, and you're pulling strings out of there and putting strings back in. Again, on a finish like this, it's the consequences are a lot less than if you had a nice shiny finish that you had to protect. But making sure you always put a piece of tape down is just a little bit of extra insurance. Here we go. Now I'm going to take these old strings like I mentioned before. I want to see exactly what I pulled off of there. So I'm pulling out a digital caliper here, and that is going to tell me the gauge of them, or the thickness, down to the thousandths. And this is 100, so 99, that'll round up to 100, and then that one is a 56 or 55. So it's actually going to be a little bit, the new set is a little bit smaller on the top end, on the G and the D, and a little bit heavier on the bottom, on the E and the A. So that's gonna affect the neck differently, and we're gonna have to adjust that to counteract the different tensions that are going on there. Now, along with the neck release changing, when you put different gauge strings on an instrument, you also want to be really careful if you're going to heavier gauge strings about the nut. And that's what we're looking at here. I have seen many nuts like that be snapped because the nut slots aren't cut wide enough for heavier strings. So it depends on how heavy you're going, and most of the time you don't have to worry about this, but if you're going to a heavier gauge string, you definitely want to check, like I did there, run it through the slot, make sure that it seats at the very bottom of the slot before you put tension on it, or else it's going to snap that nut right in half. And as you saw there, these are vintage split tuners. I love this style of tuner. So basically, same thing, you run the string past the post. I do it past the post to the next post, is how I get how much extra string I want to wrap around at the post that I'm putting the string into, if that makes sense. So I'm going to make sure this string is nicely seated in the saddle, or in the bridge over the saddle, and then I'm going to pull it past the post. I'm going to clip it where I want it, and then you just take and you stick the string right down into the hole that's in the saddle, and then you pull it through and you just string it up just like you normally would, where the wraps go downwards. These vintage tuners are great. They're super, it's got a really nice clean look to it. They don't slip. I love vintage tuners. I like the style a lot. On this bridge, there's a very small amount of space between the actual bridge and the saddle, that barrel right there. So in order to get that string to fish in there, I had to make a little bend in that string before I stuck it through the back of the bridge. So you might have to do something like that on yours. Here I am just making sure that string is nicely seated in the saddle. Then I'm gonna go ahead and get this last string strung up. And if you're new to this, the most important thing to do immediately after putting new strings on the bass is to stretch them out. So you hold it like this, you bend it between your fingers, move across the string, and then tune it back up to pitch. And then you're going to do that 3 times across all your strings by bending it, tuning it back up to pitch, bending it, tuning it back up to pitch, and that gets you in a place where you're good enough to start doing your setup work. If you start doing your setup work before you stretch the strings, you're not going to get accurate reading. So you'll get it up to pitch, you might make some adjustments, but your strings have already loosened a little bit. So what I've found is that across almost all strings is that 3 times through the process pretty much gets you there. You might have a little bit of stretching afterward, but it's going to be pretty minimal. 3 times basically does it. There's a little trick I like to use, especially when using a clip-on tuner with a bass. Sometimes those clip-on tuners have a harder time feeling the lower frequencies accurately. So I like to hit the harmonic at the 12th fret, and that pretty much gets you a clear reading every time. Now with the new strings on here, I'm sighting down the neck and seeing what changed visually, and then I'm going to run through it, see how it feels. Again, you can see by those numbers that it did what we expected it to, which is the additional tension is creating more relief in the neck. So we're going to have to tighten the neck, tighten the truss rod in the neck, and pull some of that out as much as we can. And there you can see the end of the truss rod. Now this is an import truss rod, import neck. So that is going to be in millimeters. That's going to be an Allen wrench. So here's my 4mm Allen wrench. 4mm is pretty standard. There are some different ones. Some use 5, but having a small Allen wrench set will get you there because it's going to be one of those whole numbers. So I'm going to. I don't have a great view of it here, but you can see me at the very top of the screen. You want to get it in there. Also, make sure to loosen up those 2 middle strings so you just totally don't mar those, because it'll create big old dents in there. So I loosen those up, and it also reduces some of the tension on the neck too, so you're not fighting that quite as bad. And then you want to get your wrench in there. You want to make sure it's nice and seated in there, because you do not want to strip the end of the truss rod out. And then we're just going to slowly start turning that to the right to tighten that up, and that's going to pull the bow out of the neck, or the relief out of the neck, and make that flatter. Here we go. We're going to test that relief again now and see where we're at. And we're going to end up here with about, it's about 8/100ths on the bass side, and then the treble side actually didn't change. That stayed pretty much exactly flat. Gonna run through it again, and what I'm listening for here is any sort of excessive buzzing that I'm getting. If there is excessive buzzing, we are going to handle it in a couple of different ways. One of those is putting more relief back into the neck. The other one is adjusting the height at the saddle. You can adjust the height at the nut. And then finally, you could do some fret work if you have any sort of high frets to deal with any sort of specific issues with buzzing. Now, what I'm doing right here is I'm going to match the radius, and that's what I was kind of showing with my hand motion right there, match the radius of the saddles with the radius of the fretboard. And you can do this with a radius gauge, a string radius gauge. I don't have one of those. I've made a set in the past. I've bought a set in the past, and I currently I'm actually not sure where mine is. So I'm just gonna do it with each string. You can do it like this. That's totally fine too. Or what you can do if you have one of those gauges is it basically allows you to match the radius of the fretboard, and then you're gonna set your low string and your high string, and then you're gonna match fit the radius. It's a tool that fits under the strings, and you're gonna match that radius to basically to fit the radius of the tool based on the low string and the high string. Okay, so I set the height at the saddle, and what I'm really going for is about, if I can get there, I'm going for 5/64 at the 12th fret on the low E and 4/64 on the high G at the 12th fret. Now I didn't quite get there, mostly because this neck is just a little funky. It's a little bit twisted, so I can't get it quite as flat as I would like to without getting back bow on the treble side. But I'm going to get that as low as I can while still playing nice and while I'm not getting buzzing, which is what I'm addressing here. There's buzzing on that 4th fret of the A string, and so what I'm doing is I'm adding just a tiny bit of relief back in and then raising that saddle just enough so that we're not getting any fret buzz out of that A string on the 4th fret. So the next thing to do is setting the intonation. Now let's define intonation really quick. That means that as we move up the neck, that our notes stay in tune. Say you tune the open string and then you are moving up the neck, that the notes are as in tune as possible, and that is not a given. That is a setting that we have to make sure is set up, and one that can often change with old strings. So I tell people, if you're experiencing notes, you're saying I tune up my guitar and it sounds so out of tune, or as I move up the neck it's so out of tune, that means that your intonation is bad, but bad intonation can be caused by old strings as well. So make sure that you have a fresh set of strings on your instrument before you go ahead and set the intonation. So what we're doing here is we're going to, I hit the harmonic, and then at the 12th fret, which gives me the open string, and I'm going to get that in tune to what it should be, and then I'm going to press down on the 12th fret. Now, it's important to note that harder pressure is going to pull a note sharper. So press it in the way that you are going to play, but don't press it too hard, and just kind of have that in the back of your head, that if you're pressing really hard there, it is going to pull your notes sharp. Okay, so this adjustment that I'm making to the screw on the back of the bridge, by moving the saddle forward, which would be loosening the screw, lefty-loosey would move the saddle forward, and that would shorten the string, effectively shortening the string, which sharpens it. So if you're hitting your open string and then pressing down and it is flat, then, or flatter than the octave below it, then you need to sharpen the note. So shorten to sharpen, longer to lengthen. That doesn't make any sense. Shorten to sharpen. What's the other one? Lengthen to flatten. So that's how we do that. Is we go through each string. We make sure that at the 12th fret, that the open string matches the 12th fret, and it's going to be up an octave, but you want those to both be in tune, and that is how you set the intonation there. It might take a little bit of time, but have patience, move through your strings, and make sure those are spot on. I would suggest really, trust your ear on that, because oftentimes it can not look like a huge change, like on a typical clip-on tuner. You might not see a huge change, but your ear can pick up that small little difference, and so you want to match it perfectly to what your ear is hearing. Here I'm just taking a look at the electronics. These electronics aren't anything special, but they were getting a little scratchy. So I take this electronic cleaner, spray it in the pots, and as soon as you spray it in, you want to be moving the pots around so you get a nice even coating across the component in there. Okay, now the only thing to do is to put it on a strap, plug it in, and play through it. Make sure it feels good, make sure it sounds good, you're not getting any buzzing or anything like that. Thanks for coming along on this one. If you enjoy these setup videos, or if you have any questions for me or comments, please leave them below. If you like the video, please subscribe. I would really appreciate that, and we'll see you in the next one.